Boys in the Hood. We're live. It's I don't know, 7:20 or something. I gotta put my Turbo Smart wastegate back in the box. I can send that out to my buddy Jimmy, so that can be shipped out. But tonight we're talking about, we're going to talk about camshafts, but we're talking specifically about a comment that I got on camshafts when I did a story recently, because I did two videos fairly recently that were not live feeds like this one. The two camshaft stories that I did, one was on a big block Chevy, one was on a small block Ford. But what I did was end up running one camshaft and then ran in a bunch of different configurations, NA and stroker, low compression on the big block, and blower, turbo, nitrous thing. The same thing with the 5-liter. We ran one cam, and honestly, it doesn't matter what cam that is for the discussion, because that doesn't matter. But we ran one cam and it worked well on a regular NA motor on a 5-liter, on a stroker version, one with nitrous, one with the centrifugal blower. I'd run it also with the twin screw and with the roots blower and with the centrifugal blower. And the interesting thing is, and this is actually the kind of mentality that I'm trying to educate. One is that the comment was this: well, yeah, that one cam will work on all these things, but it'll work better with optimized cam timing. And that got me thinking, well, that's part of the problem here, is that while I don't disagree with the fact that there is another cam that would make more power than this cam, because that's what cams do. If you have a 224 cam and we make it a 228 or a 230 cam at 50 on the intake side, and then we make the exhaust commensurate, basically we put a bigger camshaft in it, it's going to make more power. I mean, up to a point. There becomes other limitations, and those are some of the things that we need to talk about. How much available piston and valve clearance do we have? How much displacement do we have? Do we have other limitations like head flow or induction system or something else that would make one cam, be too big for the combination? Then we get into a whole nother thing. So the comment was, yeah, but it would work better with an optimized cam. So here are my questions for this kind of comment, and this is why I wanted to address this tonight. One is, it's really, really, first of all, we'll use that as our poll. Okay, for any combination, is there one camshaft, one cam profile that will produce the optimized or best power for a given combination? So is there something, does that one cam exist that would actually be best for a given combination? So if we had an NA 302 5-liter with whatever heads and whatever intake and whatever exhaust that had on it, is there one cam that will make the best power on that combination? And then is there one, presumably in this case, that I'm sure the mentality is, then is there a different one if we ran a centrifugal supercharger on? Is there one cam that would be best for that combination? And therein lies the problem, or the opportunity for cam manufacturers to be able to tell people that there are cams that will be better for those combinations. And actually, I don't argue with that. I'm not saying that it's all smoke and mirrors, that they're just trying to sell you a bunch of different kinds of cams. What I'm telling you is that any camshaft that makes some kind of power curve on an NA motor, and you put another camshaft in it, and whatever it does differently, it will do that. Whether there's nitrous there, it will do that. Whether there's a blower there, whether there's a turbo there. So I'll go ahead and I forgot to put my post up. But the problem is that when people make comments like this, and then the presence of all these other types of camshafts, that leads people to believe that you have to have that kind of camshaft, or that there is the possibility of this optimized cam that will make the most power, more than anything else, presumably. Certainly, it has to be a custom cam. There's no way a shelf cam can actually do that. So it has to be some kind of custom grind, because custom cams, yes, cost more money. But here are my questions for that. So whenever I hear something like that, I usually try to break it down like big picture logic. So here's my logic for this. Here's the problem that I have. The problem is not that maybe that thing doesn't exist, but you have to define the things that you're talking about. So you have to define best and you have to define optimized. So, and whenever I do a camshaft thing, people bring up David Vizard's LSA formula, whatever, like that's some sort of optimization program that produces a guaranteed success that would be the best cam of any other kind of cam. And I can tell you right now, it's not. And I love David, and he's super sharp, and it's a good formula to use as a basis for finding power. But it doesn't produce the best cam. And here's the reason. His doesn't, and nothing else does either. So I'm not just picking on David. Like I said, David's a legend, and I love him, and he's great. He's a great guy to talk to. He's got great stories, and he's got all kinds of experience, and he's probably forgotten more about camshafts than I'll ever know. But here's the problem, and it's just basic common sense. There's no way for everybody to define optimize or best the same way. You can't. If we use David's formula as an example, it makes a really powerful camshaft. And maybe even makes the most average power, if that's your thing. But how high on the list of things for your best camshaft or your optimized camshaft, how high on the list is that? And the very fact that there are more than one thing on that list tells us that nobody's list, first of all, everyone's going to have a list of the things that they have that are going to help them decide what they want for a camshaft. There's not going to be one thing. There's only one thing. This would be easy. Okay, what's the best camshaft? Well, the best camshaft or the most optimized camshaft is the one that makes the most peak power. No, it's not. It's Richard. It's the one that makes the most peak torque. No, it's not. It's the one that makes the most average power. Well, does it make the most average power in the range when you're going through the quarter mile in all of the gears? So you could go through, data log all the things that you're doing while you're running on the track, and that it makes the most average power there? Is that it? You see what I'm getting at? Here's the problem is, how do you define that? Now, what if we throw something else in there? What if we throw in the fact that, hey, we use this formula and it picked out or it just scienced out a fairly good camshaft? What if one of the things on the list wasn't just peak horsepower or peak torque or average horsepower or average torque, or even very specific, the average power production in the RPM range that I want to use so that it will make the car accelerate as fast as it can? Let's even assume that it's a drag race car. What gears are you using? What converter are you using? And this is a very important thing. Also, there are other things. What about idle quality? What about drivability? What if you wanted the thing to be emissions legal? What if you wanted to run the stock converter? There are a lot of things. What if it's in a really heavy vehicle? What if it's in a super light vehicle? What if you just want all the chop in the world? You don't care about anything else. What if you just want all the RPM in the world? Lots of guys, I get that all the time. Well, how high can I rev this? Why do you care about how high you can rev it? Why don't you tell me how much power you can make? That's not nearly as important. I want to hear the thing rev out to 8,000. Okay, you're 2,000 RPM past the power peak with that camshaft, but here's what you might be able to do to get it to rev. So the point I'm getting at is there's no way to put together one specific definition of what the best or an optimized cam will be. So if we don't have that, how can we assign a winner in any of these categories? There's too many categories, so we can't do it. So right off the bat, there's no way for one camshaft to be optimized for the combination, because the optimized cam is going to be a subjective approach at very best. There's more to that. So if that isn't enough to dissuade you from thinking that, hey, there's the one true cam, the cam to rule all other cams. There's one camshaft that's actually going to do that. There's not. There's multiple camshafts. What if we run the camshaft that you want to run, and I get 10 camshaft manufacturers, and we tell them, look, here's what we want to do. Here's the thing we have, and here's the thing that's we want to put the best camshaft in this. We want to put the optimized camshaft in this. These guys all come up with different variations of the camshaft. And like when we ran the Sabi Stage 2 versus the World, we ran the NA version, all of those camshafts were within a couple of horsepower of each other. So what if we ran one camshaft and it made 3 more peak horsepower and 3 less foot-pounds of torque? Which one of those is the best? How do you determine that? I don't know. But and the whole problem with this is that guys think that there really is, and this is partly because this is the thing that they want to happen. Like I want this to be true. Everybody wants this to be true. And then you combine our desire to have this magical thing that we want to happen, and then the manufacturers selling different cams, and not only selling different cams for different applications. So there is a blower cam, and not just a blower cam, but a centrifugal blower cam, and a positive displacement blower cam, and a high boost version, a stroker version, and a turbo version, all these other things. So right away, that has us thinking, okay, well, I have to be selective to optimize the thing for the thing that I have. And then we have custom cams. So all the shelf cams are just for the regular people. I need to get that last little bit more. I need a custom cam. And here's what I will guarantee that anybody that's ever, well, not anybody, there may be 1 or 2 guys out there, but anybody that's ever gotten their custom cam done for their combination because they got it spec'd out, and that's great. I'm all for that. I'm all for you getting the thing that you want or that you think that you need. But how many of them do you think actually compared it to something else? Like we were talking about, what if they got a shelf cam that cost $300 and they got their custom cam that cost $400, and they actually ever did a comparison between the two and found out, like we were talking about earlier, their custom cam made 3 more horsepower, but lost 3 foot-pounds of torque. To me, those are the same cam. In fact, I'd much rather spend $100 less on the camshaft that tilted that curve in some other direction that I didn't really care about. Because quite honestly, in 300 or 400 or 500 horsepower, whatever your NA motor is making, you drop 3 horsepower, you're never going to know that that's not there. And that's what usually happens to people is they put the custom cam in, they go, oh, look, I've won. Yes, you have 1,000 horsepower turbo on there and you made 1,000 horsepower with that cam. And with any of hundreds of other cams that I could select that would do exactly the same thing. So, so that's my spiel for tonight. That the comment just got me thinking about. I went down all these mental rabbit holes about all this stuff, and it just makes, because I know I was there. I've gone and not very long ago. I've gone through all of this stuff where look, I'm doing this thing, and so I need a gigantic cam to make lots of power. Because I was always under the impression for years and years and years, way back when I was doing my Mustang, is that because I remember talking to them when the guys from Crane first said, hey, look, this is the cam you should try in your car. I'm like, dude, great. You guys are the experts. That's fine. This makes sense. It's not a B cam. It's not an F cam. It's not one of these single pattern things. It's a dual pattern cam. It has the kind of intake duration that we would look at these other cams and go, we already know that kind of works well. It has more exhaust duration. Just put it in there, try it, and it will work. I'm like, okay, that's fine. It should work with this. They didn't say we're picking that because you have this cylinder head and you have this intake manifold and you're running a Vortec and you're running this gear ratio and you're running the Silver State. Why? Who runs the Silver State? Who runs wide open throttle for 32 minutes? Nobody. They didn't say any of that. They said, look, this will work. And so I put it in, and lo and behold, it does work. And it works on lots of stuff. It worked NA and nitrous and all of these things. But the thing is, and that's why I wanted to show that with the big block and with the Ford, and I could show it with LS motors and small block Chevys and Hemis and everything else, because it doesn't matter. If you have a cam in there, whatever the cam does NA, that's the important part for me. That's how I determine what's going to happen. It's not whether it's a blower cam or a nitrous cam. It's what is our starting point? Okay, we got a pretty good starting point. If we're starting at 300 horsepower and we only want to make 500, and we're going to add boost to our 300 horsepower motor, that's nothing. That's easy. Same thing if we're starting with 400 or 500 horsepower and we want to make 1,000. Look, let's just put 1,000 or 1,100 horsepower turbo on there. I don't even care what the camshaft is. I don't care what the heads are. I don't care what the intake is. If we're making 500 horsepower NA, we're going to get to 1,000. It's not going to be that hard. And it has nothing to do with the valve events or the lobe separation angle. It has nothing to do with any of that. It has to do with what we're starting with. And a lot of these guys that are doing these things don't start out with their NA combination and go, hey, look, this is what we're starting out with. And then now here's what we can get to. And here's the boost that it's going to take to get to that. Because we already know our NA power. We already know how the formula works. And all that stuff works fine. So let's see how you guys are doing on this. This is Sunday night, right? I'm watching a very good series. I'd never seen this before. I remember the story from way back. I remember reading about it. But it's about the guy that tried to win the Harrier jump jet from Pepsi. So don't tell me how it turns out. So I'm watching that. It's pretty interesting. He just needs 7 million points. What's today's mission? I'm trying to have 8,000 RPM with a CID. A CIDA intake should be probably good for that. Hot Rod Sauce, the best cam. I swear I can't write anything correctly on my phone. Good evening. Cam is just for your desired torque curve and engine characteristics. I love how camshaft manufacturers list a cam that will fit a 4-liter to an 8-liter. give you gear ratios. Yeah, it's not quite. But the thing is, they can't put everything in their cam catalogs about how specific you would need to. Like the camshaft for a 4.8 would be different than a camshaft for a 5.3 and a 6.0. And I don't know how far they can go into that in some of their writing. Need a standalone VVT controller for Gen 5. Ever ran VVT with a carb or mechanical injection? I don't think I have. Trying to think of the guys at BTR. I don't think they've ever run a carb on one of those, like on an L83 or anything. How many and Aaron, that's a good point. How many cams did you go through to find the optimized one? That's the thing. Nobody's going to be able to nail that. If I gave them the specifications of a motor and we were running it on the dyno and told them, look, here, I will give you all the information that you need. I'll give you flow rates and valve lifts and intake manifold flow and all of the variables that you need. You design me a cam that you think is going to be the best. Their first question is, what is your definition of best? What do you mean by that? Because most people's out there think that there's a cam that's going to like make more power than everything else everywhere. It's going to be way up at the bottom. It's going to be way up in the middle. It's going to be way up at the top compared to everything else because it's a custom cam, custom grind. That camshaft does not exist. I'm here to tell you. Best would be a matter of preference. Best top end power. May have a bad idle and all that stuff. Yeah. Good evening. Back to the Holley turbo manifold. Do you think the Faller turbo manifold would do better? It appears to flow better. As a guess, I would say yes. But since guys have made over 1,000 horsepower easily with both of those, I think that for the 1,000 horsepower and lower, which is probably 95% of the market, they're both going to work really well. Does anyone suggest upgrading lifters? A lot of guys do upgrade lifters. When we run the stuff from the wrecking yard, we just run the old ones. Sometimes I will, if we have taken the motor apart to put ring gap in it, which was definitely normal on all the Big Bang stuff, we will take the other injectors or the lifters out, and then I will clean them and put them in good oil. I have never disassembled them, though, and cleaned them, which I probably should have. My opinion is bore and stroke and rod length and induction heads intake affect at all. All of those things are going to help determine power, but the question is there an optimized cam for whatever combination of those things that you put together? Is there one camshaft that works better? Again, we got to define that for all of the whatever combination of those things that you put in there. VVT is a real thing. The camshaft is pretty much related to what RPM, but the thing is, it's not a specific RPM though. It would be an RPM range, but there are other things there that dictate the RPM range of the motor. The intake manifold is a perfect example of that. And if it's bad enough, the cylinder head too. I still like the Comp 268 for the street. It's old. It's a single pattern. It works well on heavy street. Add boost and nitrous is a good time. And that's the nitrous and boost. If you add that to any motor, it's going to be a good time. Your 5-liter just overheated. Asking about a coolant leak on my 223,000 miles. If I do head gasket, I should replace the heads. I want to run without overheating problems. Emissions legal. You need to find out what caused the overheating, and you need to cure that. So is it a stuck injector or a clogged injector? Is it a tune problem? Is it because if you blow a head gasket, it's that's not enough miles for the head gasket just to destroy itself, unless it's been overheated a bunch. Then if it has, you'll want to check the deck surfaces, check the water pump, check the cooling system, make sure that it's not clogged. Getaway here for a minute, watching TV with my girlfriend. Cool. Tell her we all said, hey, it's optimized if the owner of the camshaft thinks it's optimized. That's all that matters. That's it. And we talked about that last night. It doesn't do the thing that you want it to do. And that's why I hate giving people want me to tell them what camshaft to pick. And I don't want to tell them what camshaft to pick, because what I would pick for something is not the same as what you might pick, because your list, the things that are even on your list, and then the order of all of the things on your list is probably different than mine. That's why I give you, at least I can give you the power portion of it and show you, hey, look, this does this curve, this 205 cam does this, and this 210 cam, this 220 and 230 camshaft. They all do this. Here's the thing. Here's for power. If you ask questions about, can I use a stock converter, we can answer that. Is it better for drivability? As a general rule, the bigger the camshaft, the worse the drivability. So we can answer all of that stuff and kind of give you an idea. But again, you decide things on the list and then the order of the list also. And I can't do that. Shelf cam, save extra cash for pizza. I had pizza tonight from my very favorite pizza place here in our hometown. Is there an optimized cam that will produce the best power in a given range? 69% are saying yes. Yes, all the chops. See, we got chop guys in the house. Chop shops. Would raising compression make an engine louder? Yes. Got to let the dyno decide. But again, the dyno is not gonna. The dyno is just gonna tell you what that camshaft does. But like we were talking about, if you put a bunch of different camshafts in, you get to the point where they're all making lots of power. Any 230-ish cam at 50 is gonna make lots of power on a 5.3. You get to a point where you're just wiggling it around. Plus 3 horsepower, minus 3 foot-pounds. Which one of those do you pick? Which one is better? Which one is, the dyno can only give you information. Ultimately, you're going to have to choose between some trade-off mechanism that's going to be inherent in each one of the designs. You get to pick that, and the dyno is not going to pick an overall winner for you. Randy, you can have an off-the-shelf cam that's close enough to support your head flow. Now, custom cam, new springs, retainers, add $1,000 for maybe 25 horsepower. I would be very, very surprised if I picked if we had a 5.3 and I got to just pick some shelf cam on a 5.3 that had a stock head and a truck intake manifold. I'd be really surprised if anybody could put together a custom cam that made 25 more horsepower. I would almost bet on that. Does a hardened cam and lifters, you can DLC coat the like a if you have a flat tappet cam and flat tappet lifters, you could nitride the cam and you could coat the bottom of the lifters. You could DLC them, and they will stand up to more abuse, but they still have to be broken in properly. I have the perfect cam, B303. B303 versus the world. They sold a lot of those cams. I wonder if they sold more of those cams than anybody has sold of any other single camshaft. I would like to know what the sales point is on specific models of camshafts. Isn't the best cam based on your cylinder head? No, that's a common myth. People think, oh, well, I have to pick the cam based on how my head flows. And that's not the case. I mean, it's one thing that you could look at, but again, it tells you nothing about which converter to use. It tells you nothing about idle quality. It tells you nothing about what low speed power is going to be. It doesn't even tell you what high speed power is going to be. I think it just makes people feel better that, oh, look, I pick a 600 lift cam because my head flow peaks at 600 lift. If you can put a camshaft in that's 650 lift, and even if your head flow levels out at 600, you can still make more power. If you build a specific combination with a specific goal in mind, it makes sense that a specific cam profile would best fulfill those goals. There's probably 100 camshafts that will do exactly the same thing. I have an Anderson N61 and my 347. That's a pretty popular camshaft too. I want to hear rev out to 8,000. Yeah. Does Dulcich have any Mopars that will rev out to 8,000? GFS TrackMax cams. Is there a company making the big block LS? Just the multi-engines ones. Randy, you're building a drag and drive car with a conventional small block with a Pro Charger? No, they guys make really, really big power with conventional small blocks if that's what you want to do. Or like we talked about last night, you can build that combination to make the power that you want, right? Can you achieve what you want to achieve with that? They have Pro Chargers that make 1 million horsepower. So if you build your small block accordingly, you can do whatever the Pro Charger that you put on there will do. And doing a swap, which is better, adding the carbon intake or leaving it the way it comes? Are you talking about swapping in an LS? You got to give me more information. Yeah, don't overlook valve springs. You'd be absolutely shocked to find out how much dirt is inside the lifters. I know. I've talked to Billy Godbold about that quite a few times, and he said that the the best filter screens in the engine are in the lifters. He said so. There's going to be a lot of stuff in there. Can you run 109 LSA on the 5.7 Hemi? Yes. Depending on how much duration you're talking about, because the LSA isn't in charge of everything, but depending on how much duration that is, it's not going to idle very well. Todd, you didn't hurt your engine? Truck Norris cam works good for nitrous. Every cam works good for nitrous. Just the camshaft should decide what your NA power is, and then you add to that. I don't like big cams unless I'm raising dynamic compression to match. So if you put a big camshaft in it, then you're raising static compression to raise the dynamic compression. Unless you're tightening the LSA, that could help a little bit too. But take a look at how well the big camshaft that we ran in the big block was, even at low compression. So sub 9-to-1 compression with a 271, 280 something camshaft and 750 lift. I love Coyotes for this reason. Get the duration I want and find out where the cam wants to be on the dyno. The Coyote's nice. Having to be able to individually adjust the intake and the exhaust cam is good. And also having a 4-valve head goes a long way. And if you have variable cam to go in there too, that's also beneficial. All that's really good. Although there is a limit to what lift and duration you can run on those particular heads, and there's a limit to how much you can get away with VVT. Because after you go with the cam that's big enough, then you can no longer activate VVT. It just has to be fixed unless you put some fairly serious, generous valve reliefs in there. I want a stage 2 Texas speed cam. My truck, 5.3, great cam. I'm happy with the power. That's all that matters, man. That's a win. Just wish the curve was a bit lower in RPM. Peak horsepower is at 6,200. It's kind of soft below 3,500. Is it a stage 2 truck cam, I hope? Civilians are usually not allowed to own weapons of war. Well, the rule was, especially back in the 90s, for the Harrier, if that's what you're talking about, that you could own, a civilian can own that. They just can't have any of the weapons. They can't have any of the, they can't have some of, they couldn't have some of the radar stuff, no guns and no missiles. Otherwise, the thing, a civilian could have owned it. Sleeper, if you have an adjustable keyway setup, the only way to test on which one works better is to test it. You got to run it one way, run it the other way, run it the other way. So I'm scrolling down. Let's see how our poll is doing. 71% are saying yes, that they think an optimized camshaft is going to make more power. How many turbo exhaust housings do you have to go through to get one that's optimized for your engine? Yeah. I think that there's fewer with the ARs because there's going to be fewer available for any given turbo. You know, if you have 3 or 4 or 5 for any popular turbo, that would kind of be the limit, I would think. And then adjusting that would be a matter of, again, you're going to have to optimize it for the thing that you want. But there would be way more camshafts available for combinations that would do the same thing. Yeah, I'm scrolling. I agree that you can optimize a camshaft, but optimize is a subjective term. Yes, it is. But shorty headers be better than stock LS manifolds. I have the video up. Check out. You can see the shorty headers are not really worth very much power. They're lighter weight, so maybe you get some kind of gain from a couple of horsepower that they might do over a stock manifold. You have to do analysis on where your time is spent and what gear you're in to prioritize. Track analysis and driving style are part of this. They are, but again, we've talked about that. I want to hear rev out. Yep. Oh, there we go. Where do you want compression on a turbo? Maximum versus minimum? That's not an absolute thing. What you need to do is put together a combination that does the thing that you want it to do. So do you want, for instance, do you want to run it on 87 octane? Do you want to run it on 91, 94? Are you going to run E85? All of those things would require a different static compression and or dynamic compression and or maximum air intake temperature, or do you have you soften the chambers? I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on there that's not just a compression ratio deal. And for me, I don't like to try to put lots of static compression in a turbo motor. The turbo motor is already going to make the power. I mean, in my opinion, when you start adding static compression, you start narrowing the tuning window. And by narrowing the tuning window, I mean, you're getting closer and closer to having a problem. And it's just not worth it. The benefit there, I mean, if I was going drag racing and I had a class where we were limited in turbo size or blower size or whatever, and then you have to jack the static compression up to make the power that everybody else is going to make because they're going to be doing it, then I would do it. I wouldn't do it for a street motor. Cam timing could be optimized for the ram tuning of the intake and the scavenging of the exhaust. Those things are going to happen anyway. The cam timing actually just initiates those waves. Tool still lifters are the way to go. The math on pressure ratio curves for AR are pretty straightforward. Yeah. But ultimately, you have to still, you'd be better off testing them because you don't know how they work in your vehicle with your combination of weight and gearing environment and whatever you're racing it in. If it's a drag race, if it's a road race car, if it's a silly Bonneville or Silver State kind of thing, you would pick different AR ratios, certainly on the hot side for all of those applications. How many parts do you go through to optimize? And that's the thing. I don't think you would ever stop if you were continually looking for optimization. Like look at all of the development that they go through in any form of racing. Look at Pro Stock. Look at stock eliminators. Look at the stuff that they're constantly doing to make their thing. Every year they get faster and faster, and you would think that they would have optimized their thing. But the thing is that then they change one thing. Well, what happens if I change now? Like if I change the camshaft? Okay, now if I change the camshaft, I change the cam timing. Now we have to go search for what we need to do now to our tunnel ram, what we need to do now to our heads, and the combination of valve size, and maybe bore and stroke, and maybe static compression. And there's all kinds of other things that could go into making all of that work now with one other thing that they've changed. And they're looking for something very, very specific. They're looking for a very narrow RPM range where they're trying to optimize average power. All of us aren't looking for that. What's the cheapest way to get 800 horsepower with a 5.3? Put a S475 or a VS Racing 7875 turbo on it and injectors and intercooler and pump, and your 5.3 will do that. And the stock heads are fine. You just need valve springs and a camshaft. On a sloppy stage 3, 5.3 or LS1 pack 12, 18 springs, was a good spot to set rev limiter, and where does power start to fall off? I've got it at 6,400. Is it a sloppy stage 2 camshaft? You can take a look. If it's a sloppy stage 2 camshaft, you can take a look at all the power curves I have, because we've run that on a 5.3. You can see where it makes power and where it falls off, and then you could set your rev limiter accordingly. If only it was as easy as just changing the exhaust housing and wind up rebuilding the downpipe and the charge pipe, because the different AR puts the center line of the shaft in a different spot. That's all part of it. When you're working on something and you change one thing, that means you're going to change like a whole bunch of other things, because that's the snowball effect. That's what happens. That's why working on cars is so much fun. How much degrees of time do you add per octane on fuel? I don't do it that way. Richard, what ring gap on a 5.3? What's the limit of boost you can run on it? You could, on 30, we ran the Big Bang stuff, which was about 30 pounds, 29 point something pounds on the truck one. And it was on a 4-inch bore, and it had 31 or 32. So you at that range, you can run any amount of boost. The rings won't ever come together. You'll break something else. Like ours was a stock bottom end. So you'll break something else before you'll worry about ring gap having any effect. And we're going to hide the user on this channel because you're not invited here and we don't like you. Can you make a video proving CarCraft 400 horsepower small block Ford with stock cam is false? I want to do that. I'm not doing it specifically to prove that what they did was false. I have never seen that, and I've never seen, having run lots and lots and lots of those, way more than those guys have. I've never seen anything come close to that. So I'd like to see if there's something that I'm missing. Maybe it's a learning experience for me. Richard, I know you put your cams in at 0. Do you think degreeing a cam would change the outcome? Change the outcome about what? Anthony, I'm scrolling back to find out. Finished my 72 Pontiac Le Mans. Been driving the two things I'm most happy about. It runs on 87 octane and 17 miles per gallon. That's perfect. What's the best bang for the buck head for a modular Ford? If it's a 2-valve, then I would just use a stock PI head and port it. Anthony, okay, 4.8 and small turbo. Will it get better mileage and horsepower than a big cam and headers? So it will get better. Are you comparing the turbo version versus the NA version with a big cam and headers? Because if that's the case, the turbo version with a stock cam would get better cruise mileage than a big cam and headers. If that's your question. Lake Speed's interview of Ed Pink. I'm gonna have to watch that. Free valve is definitely is always the answer. I've almost a give me Lanati cam with intake and exhaust ratio 221. Is it a single pattern? Any camshaft will work, and especially if that's a 221 and it's a single pattern cam. If it's a Lanati, I'd make sure that it's 558. It should not have real aggressive lobes on it. Then I was going to say some of their lobe profiles are really aggressive and they tend to get into valve float, but that doesn't sound like that's going to be a problem. I don't know what the intake and exhaust is 221, valveless at 558. So if it's a single pattern, that camshaft will be better than a stock one, than a stock 5.3 by quite a bit. It will make more power. It's not ideal. I like dual pattern cams for those, but that one will still work. I see where Nelson's built your new red stock daily GMC work truck. Really? Tom Nelson built me an engine for that? Is sloppy stage 2 cam enough for a 408 stroker? Well, it depends on what you're trying to get done with it. Running all the boost. What type of cam would you recommend for a V6? So you got to tell me which V6 it is. And you got to tell me you want to have it as a streetcar, or how much power do you want to make? Are you running turbo? If your list is it's going to be a streetcar, I'm going to use a stock converter, I want idle good stuff, then that is going to narrow the field of cams that you could put down that you could use in there. And also, if it's a V6 that people don't make cams for, then you're going to have to regrind something. It's a stage 2 high lift, 212, 218, 600, 112. Is that the Texas Speed one that you're talking about? 212 shouldn't be terrible. Take a look at the BTR truck cams. Oh, it's a 600 lift though, so that's not even going to be a truck cam. That's going to be that. Is that a stage 2 NA cam? Seems kind of small for a stage 2 NA cam. Got a Trek Norris and a ported head 6-liter with a TBS intake. What is a better upgrade, headers or intake manifold? Well, if you already have a Trailblazer SS, then you're probably good, because the only step up from there is going to be a fast. And that's going to be really expensive. So then I would recommend headers, but the headers are a headers over a stock cast over the cast iron exhaust manifolds will work pretty well on a 6-liter, especially a cammed one. Turbo versus NA. The turbo one will get you better mileage, and it will also drive better than something that has a big camshaft in it. You're going to test a new LT base Chevy V6. I have videos up on that already. The guys from Brian Tooley did some testing on some camshafts that they did on those little LV3s and LV1s, and so there's some videos up on that already. Turbos are much to be gained by dumping exhaust out as opposed to through mufflers. Yes, there can be a lot. Take a look at the video that I have up on testing exhaust systems and what effect it has on power. you want the exhaust coming out of the turbo to be as free flow as possible. So once you do that, the turbo is going to get really happy. It's going to be way more responsive, and it's going to want to make a lot more power, depending on your current power level and how restrictive your muffler-based exhaust is. What kind of power should I expect with a cam and bolt-ons on L77? Is a 77 a 6-liter? Yeah, it's a 6-liter. $10.4, 362 horsepower. They had it in a Caprice Police Pursuit vehicle. That's kind of cool. Oh, so it's an aluminum block 6-liter. Oh, very cool. Yes, you can, depending on what cam you put in it, it could make a lot of power. That has a I think does that have a 243 head on? I think it does, right? Or is it or is that a Recport head? It is a Recport. Okay. 823 head. So that's like an LY6 then. So take a look at the videos that I have up on the LY6 stuff. I ran those with a lot of different things, but I ran it with the factory Recport heads and then lots of different camshafts. And so I don't know what camshaft you have, but you can look up there and go, oh, well, I have this kind of camshaft, so it makes this much power. Let's see. Scrolling. From watching a million of your videos like the L33 with a fast Trek Norris cam, S475 with tubular headers. That'll be good. That'll be a good combination. That's 1,000 horsepower potential stuff. Whatever the max of the S475 is that you pick. Yeah, that's news to me about the blocks too. I don't remember Mahovitz telling me about that. Tell us about the 396. I haven't put it together yet. It's still in the painting phase. Were there ever old school deck extensions? I don't know. We did that on the Honda B series, but it's because they were the Dart sleeve guys did it. Richard, during your testing of Pro Chargers for LS or Gen 5 builds you've done, what's the most boost you've seen or run? I know we've run a little over 20 pounds on one of them, but I think that's the most pressure we've run. But we've run some 13 or 1400 horsepower with them. I'm not nearly as concerned about boost because the boost is going to be a function of the NA power output and then the boosted power output. So that combination is going to dictate the pressure. So we're going to run, if you try to max out the blower, the more efficient the motor is that you run it on, the lower the boost level is going to be. And that's actually better. Richard, thanks for your time. Installed a few cams with unknown opening and closing. Anyhow, I set it at 20 degrees before top dead center for opening and 80 after. On overlap pistons, top notch head 120 degrees. Let's see. Is there a particular boost controller that you like? The one that I've used the most often is the one that I've had since It's actually the manual one, and it's Turbo XS. I think it's the one with the little Allen wrench thing at the top of it. It's just been around forever, and it's been run on everything. But the Turbo Smart one is better, and then the one that we've run at Westech during testing for the turbo motors on the dyno, we normally run a TC1 just because it's already hooked up, and the guy gave it to the guys at Westech, so we've used that one a lot. But I don't have a particular one that I recommend for being in the car. Are ported heads 706 or 862 worthwhile on a cam only NA53? Yeah, take a look at the videos that I have up where we did a cam and ported heads, 706 heads in this case. And then we also ran it with a fast manifold. As always, the fast manifold was worth power over the truck manifold. But ported heads are worthwhile on something that you're trying to make the maximum amount of NA power with. Have you done a sloppy stage 2 on a 4.3? Will stock springs survive if the rev limiter is 5,000? The rev limit has nothing to do with why you would have to have springs on a sloppy stage 2. You have to have springs on it because the lift is too high. For the stock spring will only allow 500 lift, and the sloppy stage 2 is 585 lift. So you'll get into coil bind, and that's not good. So you need springs. Or you need a camshaft that is a no springs required cam, like a Brian Tooley. I mean, I think other people have them too, but that new Truck Norris cam that's an NSR cam, we ran with the stock 4853 springs. Vortec or Torque Storm, you need to ask yourself how much power you want to make. The Torque Storm is a lower flow, lower power output blower. Vortec has stuff that goes way out in power, 1,500, 2,000 horsepower. The Torque Storm is more like a 700 or 750 horsepower, even though they've told me that guys have paid more than that. Every one that I've tested seems to be in that kind of range. So that's what I tell people. But at any rate, if you look at it physically, look at the impeller size and look at the opening and look at the maximum RPM potential and stuff, it's not a really high horsepower deal. Like a ProCharger or a Torque or a Vortec supercharger, they have superchargers that are 1,000 plus horsepower deals, and that the Torque Storm is not one of those. So it depends on your power level. Richard, can you run an LS3 on intake on 706 heads without adapters? No. And you shouldn't want to. There are other intake manifolds that you'd put on a cathedral port head. If you want to run an LS3 intake, you should run it on an LS3 headed motor. that works really good. Then it's really hard to beat, but otherwise I wouldn't try to mix and match the cathedral port and the rec port stuff. There's no reason to do that. There's just such good intake manifolds for both of them. And unless I was doing an LSA blower on a cathedral port deal, then I would use that adapter intake manifold or whatever that they use. Is there an optimized cam that will produce the best power at any given combination? 73% are saying yes. So we will end our poll there on that note. Richard, I've been racking my brain for months trying to pick a cam for LC2, Buick T-type ported heads, Champion ported intake, 72 millimeter, custom precision, ball bearing turbo. Well, before I ask the question, I'm going to go ahead and do a search here. So I'm assuming that an LC2 is the 3.8 liter Grand National motor that you're talking about. Are there a bunch of them to choose from? Would you use a vacuum distributor on the street with boost or nitrous? Yes, if you could make it work also as a vacuum advanced boost retard, because there are those kinds of pods for some distributors, and so that actually can work fairly well, and it's a fairly good way to. Because the problem, you usually fuel is not a problem with these boosted applications, particularly on blow through things. So unless you have a boost timing retard deal like on your MSD or your Crane Interceptor, then you have to figure out some other way to take timing away under boost and have it there like when you're cruising and stuff. So that would be an ideal situation if the boost retard pod was set up so that it retarded the right amount under boost, because it's going to have some sort of stop and it's going to have some sort of maximum available like retard. I have a Peanut Port 454. I'm putting in the 77 Malibu. Should I upgrade the heads or add boost? Planning to do a cam and intake. I have an MSD 6AL2 to control timing. Any experience with them? The thing that I don't know about that is does that have a map sensor, and does it have a multi-bar map sensor so that you can control timing under boost? If that's the case, then that will work really good. I just don't know the part number on the MSD. I know that they had those available so that you could retard timing under boost, which is a really good idea because that's the critical element in making these boosted things work. Porting the heads will help a little bit, but not nearly as much as boost will. Richard, do you recommend not using VVT cams when locking out the VVT on a double overhead cam V8? Why would you lock the cams out if you're running VVT cams? I don't understand. If you have VVT cams and you have the piston to valve clearance necessary to use them and they're stock cams, why wouldn't you just keep VVT working? Because it's definitely beneficial. It's definitely beneficial. 2 more minutes. I'd like to know the process you go through during a dyno run. Well, you set the dyno controls for whatever start and ending RPM you have. And then you go to wide open throttle. And as you're going to wide open throttle, the absorber, the water brake basically, grabs a hold of the motor and limits the RPM at the start RPM. And then you push go and then it accelerates at a fixed rate, which you program in there. You can make it a lot of different things. The standard kind of thing is 300 RPM per second. And then that goes up from 3000 to 6500. And then you pull off the throttle because you'll hear it got to the end RPM basically. And then you pull off the throttle and then it will print out all the nice data for you. David Vizard and Mike Jones have great cam programs. Yeah, I'm familiar with them. And none of those change the things that we talked about tonight. None of that changes anything. That's the other thing is that, and it's funny about this industry, and I think it's guys in general, that for some reason they make it a contest. Like if one person suggests something, somebody else wants the idea to be theirs because they want all the accolades or popularity or whatever from it. I'm like, look, everybody here is in this together. We're all here to help and to learn. I'm not trying to tell people that I know more than everybody else. I'll never say that to anybody about myself. That's just nonsense. You don't have to try to prove that you're the best tuner or the best drag racer or the best transmission guy or whatever. If you're trying to do that, you need to figure out what your motivation is because there's something else going on. We can all like work together and help but there's a lot of people out there that don't want to do that. The poll's gone. It's out. Is a Holley Terminator Max completely capable of running and tuning a turbo LS swap? I would think that it is. I've never done it. I've never done a swap, so I'm the wrong guy to ask about that. Yeah, we all do, Sergeant. I mean, everybody wants. That's why when we're in class, that's why we want to be the first ones to raise our hand. I think the poll should have been, how many times have you tried? Because I know there's people here. I see it all the time. Like, because I can't read this. Maybe the poll for tomorrow morning will be, how many times have you made or phrased a question as to try to stump Richard? I get that all the time, and I don't understand why people would do that. I want as much horsepower and torque as possible. Do you want peak torque, peak horsepower, average torque? Again, what about your converter? What about drivability? What about idle? All those things matter. And on that note, it is time to go. It's the weekend because next week we have it off. It's awesome. Everybody they're off school for Thanksgiving. So you guys have a safe rest of the weekend. There's obviously not a whole bunch of time left, but I will see everybody here tomorrow. Pew, pew.